It's a pleasure to be here today. For those tuning in and listening in, Len Faul is joining me here in Perth, Ontario. Len is the spokesperson for the new group that started up a little while back of retired and active duty police officers under the name Police on Guard for Thee.
Yes. And
they have serious concerns and reservations about the measures in place and the unlawful or unconstitutional measures in place that police are being forced or being told that they must enforce.
Yes.
And just as a little bit of a background, Len is retired now, but has been a police officer for 42 years.
43 years.
43 years.
Yeah.
And retired a few years back as inspector.
Yes, sir.
For the Toronto Police Services. So,
yes.
So Len, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me, sir.
And thanks for all the good work Police on Guard for Thee is doing. Mm-hmm. So maybe if we can start off a little bit, Len, of maybe just a little brief intro on Police on Guard for Thee.
Certainly. The group was started by a small handful of frontline active officers mm-hmm. that were being tasked to enforce this, what they firmly believe is unconstitutional stay-at-home regulation. The regulation itself provides ample exceptions for people to get out and exercise and shop and go visit people that are on their own, etc., etc. There's lots of reasons to be out.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the legislation that requires a citizen to identify themselves or explain what they're doing.
Right, right. We still are a free society.
Yes, we are. Yes, well, we don't have to carry identification and we don't have to tell the police what we're doing unless we're arrested or they're in an active investigation of a specific crime.
Right.
Then we should help, obviously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What this is causing is for the frontline officers to be very torn internally. Mm-hmm. This is causing a lot of stress, mm-hmm. both mentally and within their hearts, because they want to obey their command officers and their supervisors. Mm-hmm. They know it's a structured organization and you obey the last command.
Yep.
But they also know that in Canada, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is paramount. They're trained that way right from day one. It's drummed into them. Every time they go to court, there's a possibility of a freedom issue being raised. Mm-hmm. And they can see that this regulation, which is only a provincial regulation, really contradicts that rights that every citizen enjoys. Mm-hmm. It's also causing a lot of stress and discomfort for our citizens mm-hmm. to be faced by police officers in circumstances where they couldn't ever imagine finding themselves. They're not criminals. They're not bad people. These are good, honest, everyday people that are being harassed, that are being on times dealt with violently, and are being issued outrageous charges and summonses.
So, as far as I know, the Police on Guard for the active duty members who are part of that association have met with Rocco Galati.
Yes.
They have, I think there is going to be a claim brought forward or some legal action brought forward on behalf of these active duty police officers to clarify and give direction from the courts about the police officer's role in enforcing these regulations. And
yes,
and I believe that is due any day now, or very, very.
Yes, Mr. Glady is advising us that he is fairly close to filing the statement of claim, which is the first part of it. Yes,
right.
Fairly close to that.
Mm-hmm. So, listen, we want to talk a little bit as well about what the public wants to or what the public ought to know in their dealings with the police. But I want to just explore this. It has bothered me that we see some police services, not all, because we have seen enforcement done in different ways in different jurisdictions.
Yes.
But I've seen in Toronto with the protests recently that the brass, and I say the police brass, seem to have forgotten the connection between people, the public, and our police. Like, this is a
Very much so.
long-held, UK, British tradition that citizens and the police, there's no daylight between them.
Correct.
Like, the public is good, police are good, and we're there to assist one another.
Yes.
And it seems the brass has really forgotten this and don't understand the consequences of when the public and the police are not seen as one, when they're opposing one another. And as an inspector, you would have been that brass.
Well, I wouldn't have been.
The office.
Insofar as I would have been a thorn in command's side, because I would have been constantly reminding them of the need to protect the public.
Yeah.
That's our job out there, serve and protect.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at. Why is the brass today, why have they lost sight of that fundamental, what appears that they've lost sight of it anyway?
I honestly can't answer that. I really don't know. I've not been purview to any conversations with the command.
Yeah.
What I can see, and we have heard, is that the mayor and councillors have expressed their displeasure at groups of people protesting on Dundas Square. Even so far as the mayor saying that what they were doing was wrong.
Right.
And he couldn't be more wrong himself.
Sure, yeah.
We have our rights to protest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Dundas Square is a public forum for it. Mm-hmm. We've had lots of protests there. Hardly any police needed at all.
Right. Well,
because the citizens particularly in Canada, we don't riot.
No. Well, no, that's
we just don't. We protest properly.
Well, this is one thing that I think people need to remember. I have not seen any protests in Canada about COVID or these measures that could not be characterized in any other way other than peaceful assembly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's not only has there not been violence, there's not even been threats of violence.
No.
And whether that's at Dundas Square or when I've held ones at Queen's Park, it's just these are peaceful people.
Everyday people.
And this needs to be understood as well. Like politicians directing the police that they don't like political protests. That's a dangerous. That's the Rubicon to cross when politicians are saying that to law enforcement that we don't want protesting over public policy. That's a dangerous.
Very much so. Very much so. Which is why the chief of police cannot be given any order or direction when it comes to operational issues.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Certainly the board can talk about policy and directives and so on, but not operational issues.
Yeah.
That is strictly the chief's purview.
Yeah.
So if there is pressure on the chief from any politicians, obviously he has to deal with that in whatever way he sees fit.
Yeah. What about within the organization itself, any police service, Len? If police officers are being asked to go out and give somebody a ticket for being on the toboggan hill or being on the rink playing hockey, because we've seen these examples. Mm-hmm. What discretion? Well, what would you do if you would go back early into your career when you weren't the inspector, when you were on on duty, and the chief or the sergeant or whoever said, there's too many people congregating on that toboggan hill, and I want you to go and disperse it. Like, or it could be anything. I'm just using that as an illustration.
Yes.
Like, what mechanisms are there available for the active duty police officers to raise that concern up through that chain of command as well?
It's very difficult because all police organisations are quasi-military, for want of a better term. There is a very clearly defined rank structure.
Yeah.
And the frontline officer would have to go to his immediate supervisor. Yeah. If that supervisor feels appropriate, they can go to the next level, and that level can go up, and so on.
Right.
It's not usual for a frontline officer to say to the chief, "What you're doing, I think it's wrong, chief."
Yeah. Right.
Not that there's officers that aren't capable of doing that, but that's just not the appropriate way of doing it. There is a chain of command to follow. Yeah. And whether any of those concerns have reached that lofty level, I can't comment. I really don't know.
Right.
But as the question should be asked, what's the role and responsibility of that frontline officer when directed to do that?
Yeah.
That frontline officer has complete discretion.
Right.
Yeah. Absolute discretion.
Yeah.
If the frontline officer wants to go to the hill and sees there's lots of people there, if he feels so inclined, he could talk to the people.
Yeah.
And explain to them that, I'm sorry, but there are some regulations about keeping distance and so on. But as long as everybody stays their distance, this is a public place.
Right.
It's not my position to tell you not to be here.
Yeah. Well, but I guess that raises up another point. And that is, never before in my lifetime have I seen the law or the orders or what it appears to be the law changing on a daily basis. And, and it's hard for the public to keep up with, what is the rule today in the spot where I live today. Yes. And I know if I drive 100 kilometers away, it could be a completely different set of rules.
Yes.
But how are the police also keeping up with, because compounding that problem is also the premier's and the mayor's words, which aren't the law.
No, they're not.
But they're being seen as to having weight and guidance in the law.
Yes.
And,
it is really challenging, but when it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
It's challenging from shift to shift for each of the officers. What am I do today?
Yeah.
What's my powers today?
Right.
And it's very difficult to stay on top of that if the legislation isn't clear.
Yeah.
The current stay-at-home regulation, I think, was very poorly conceived, poorly written.
Yeah.
It leaves so many loopholes as to be unbelievable. It's almost unenforceable. Yeah. Which is why officers are occasionally resorting to the criminal code in order to enforce sections of the stay-at-home legislation, which was never, ever intended. Yeah. Never intended for that. It is very difficult. We, as a group, the Police on Guard group, are doing our utmost to get the message out there on a daily basis as best we can, in order for the public to understand what is going on today. Yeah. But it's going to change and keep changing. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I emigrated to Canada, and one of the joys that I have enjoyed in my time here, is that Canadians, on a whole, are incredibly compliant. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you ask a Canadian nicely to do something, they will do it and apologize. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's all that's needed. That's all that's needed. If our Premier had asked people to do things, ask them politely to, best as they can, stay at home, best as you can, keep your distance, best as you can, whatever the health authorities are suggesting next, I guarantee 99% of the public will comply.
Well, not only is that, that's a fact, and let's go back a year, or just about a year, where in March we were all requested to stay at home, close up businesses, except for, the grocery stores and the real basic needs of life. and everybody did.
Yes.
You know, like everybody fully and willingly
Yes.
complied.
Absolutely.
And you know, that's and there was no need for enforcement. There was no need for a heavy hand. There was no need for all these other, you know, if people just, and I think that's true, that Canadians, as a very general statement, but broad-based general statement, that we're a law-abiding type of people.
Wonderful people.
We have showed deference to authority, but authority has also never taken extreme measures against the public.
No.
You know, so there's been always a good, moderate, tempered, and good relationship.
Yes, very much so.
You know, now that's changing. Like we saw that one, that was a disagreeable video that I saw with the police officer in Barrie with a skateboarder.
With the skateboarder, yes.
You know,
that was dreadful. Fortunately, that is being dealt with. Yes, Chief Kim Greenwood there is going to bring in another service to do the investigation, so that there can be no suggestion of partiality there. It will be a different police service.
But even, you know, we take away the extreme response and just look at what we know, like a skateboarder getting a ticket for going through a red light, you know, and then the resulting other offense of skateboarding on the sidewalk. Like these are never before seen responses that I've ever seen in my life in Canada.
No.
You know.
No.
So, you know, that's one of the things I'm hopeful is that Police on Guard for and what I've seen is providing that context and understanding to police officers. But I would also say that, you know, it's important for, and maybe I'm wrong here, I don't know, but you know, I think there's probably an obligation as well for those police officers, if they do see one of their fellow colleagues acting in a way that is not respectful of the public, that you know, that they should say, buddy, you know, this is not how we do things here.
Absolutely. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. It's very clear in the video, the officer was angry.
Yeah.
Angry. If you can't control your anger, you shouldn't be a policeman, in my humble opinion, because people are going to swear at you. They are going to call you names. They are going to be rude occasionally, not often. And very, very early on in a career, you have to develop a thick skin and just ignore it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when I first saw it, my first gut reaction, okay, and not that gut reactions are perfect by any means, but they're instructive. And I said, this guy is really, really angry.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, and I thought back to myself, I said, you know, this is not dissimilar to what we're seeing with a lot of people in society. Like, a lot of people are under a significant amount of stress. They're, you know, they not being able to get their kids to school, not being able to get medical appointments done. Mm-hmm. Like, everything is disrupted and disorganized and chaotic for a great many people. And I thought, you know, I wonder how much of these stay-at-home orders and these lockdowns and these unconstitutional measures are impacting on that police officer's life, and it's being played out with a young fella, 20 years old, on a skateboard. You know.
Yes. Who knows what his home life situation is and what he's struggling with. But of course, many police officers are dealing with that, having children at home. Of course, they've got to work shift work. Not being able to get to medical appointments, as you say. It's affecting everybody. Well, public and police.
Yeah, and I was talking to a medical doctor who does a lot with the Ottawa police. In the significant rise in suicides that police are attending to, and this significant rise in domestic abuse and that they're attending to, and she was saying to me, like, this is having a dramatic and profound impact on the mental health of the police officers now. That
having to deal with that.
Yeah, like I've never attended to a suicide, but they're happening far more frequently now, and that's got to be weigh heavily, I would think.
It does. It does, and any death does.
Yeah.
But particularly suicides in young people.
Yeah.
Of what we're experiencing in Ottawa, CHEO tell us that they're seeing more babies with head injuries than they've ever seen.
Yeah.
That's dreadful. That's absolutely horrifying. They've got to end this lockdown. They're a year ago. We talked about a year ago. We didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't know whether this was going to be a Spanish flu and kill millions of people. Yeah. Was this going to be an Ebola? We had no idea. We know now.
Yeah.
We know the part of our community that is most at risk. Yeah. We know that the vast majority, over 99% of the people that get this are going to survive.
That's right. Yeah. No, it's odd. We're still acting as if we don't have facts and evidence, but that we're acting upon these what have turned out to be exaggerated or highly inaccurate models and projections. But the evidence is clear now.
Very much so.
That most people, like 99% of people are not at risk.
No.
If you're in that community that is very elderly, that have got diminished or frail health,
yes,
and or in long-term care, then there is a small community and demographic in the country that is at risk.
Absolutely, and our money and our efforts should be put into protecting them.
Yeah. So listen, one more thing that I wanted just to ask your thoughts on, Len, and that is, as we're seeing this change in policing with these emergency measures, what is important for the public to know if a police officer comes up to them or there's an interaction and he says, I want to see your identification, or where are you going and what are you doing, and like what sort of response ought there be from that innocent individual? I put that, it's different if you're, if he's has just seen you do a smash and grab at a store or something. I'm talking about somebody who's walking down the street, maybe a husband and wife, maybe a dad and a kid, and is approached or even at a protest where you're being peaceful.
Right. The response will come naturally, and virtually everybody will be polite, and remain polite, and not want to upset the officer at all. However, what they should ask them is, where do you get your authority to ask me these questions? Mm-hmm. Do you know what my rights are? Do you know what your roles and responsibilities are?
Right.
Not in a aggressive or rude manner, but just questioning. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong. It's perfectly okay. The officer can ask questions. Yes, he can. I can ask a question of anybody I like. But if that person chooses not to talk to me, that's their right to. The only time I have to identify myself is if I'm driving on a public road and I'm stopped.
Right.
Period. Mm-hmm. If I'm arrested, I have to identify myself. If it is a major investigation and you are thought to be either a person of interest or a suspect or a witness, they can ask for your name and address, etc. But for just walking down the street or walking across Dundas Square, no.
There's
it doesn't have to.
There's no lawful obligation.
None at all.
What I often tell people, and it's just, I guess, part of my nature, is, whenever anybody asks me to do something, I always, why?
Yes.
Because and I should qualify that as well. You know, if my wife asked me to get her a cup of tea, I don't say why. You know, but if somebody poses a statement to you in the form of direction or in a form of with authority, in that leads you to believe that that you are compelled to do that, I ask why. Why do you want to know my name?
Absolutely.
You know, and maybe it's a good and lawful and reason, but
Absolutely.
But you know, but explain yourself why you want, and if I was ever to be asked, I've never been asked by a police officer, where are you going? But my first thing would be, you know, why do you want to know? And my second response would probably be, you know, well, it's none of your business where I'm going.
No, it's not.
You know, well, that's right. Like,
but even if the member of the public felt felt that they must explain, to say to the officer, well, my name is Len Faul, and I'm out to get some fresh air and exercise. What's wrong with that? What am I doing wrong? The regulation allows that.
Yeah, well, it's hard to know what you're doing right or wrong these days.
Quite. What is it you're suggesting that I'm doing wrong? I'm doing my best to keep apart from everybody else, but I can't control everybody else.
No.
I'm doing my utmost to stay a certain distance away. If they crowd me in, what am I supposed to do?
Well, listen, I'm looking forward to seeing the statement of claim by the police on guard for thee.
Yes.
And I hope it's a matter that comes before the courts quickly.
Yes, that's the challenge, of course. Is our courts are very, very busy. Plus, they are constrained by certain rules and regulations as well, and it may take some considerable time before it could ever come to trial. And we know that this will all be long over by then. But we mustn't stop.
No.
We must set the groundwork in order that they never do this again. That they acknowledge that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is paramount. It's the number one law in the land.
It's not a document.
It says in the Emergency Measures and Civil Protection Act that it must obey the Charter. Well, it says in the Federal Emergency Act that it must obey the Charter. And here we go, flying straight in the face of it.
Well, this is one of the amazing things is, you know, it's not a document that is there for the purpose of going around.
No.
It's there as you go no farther, and people need to realize, like the Constitution is there to constrain the government's actions, and we recognize a long time ago that the only way to properly protect freedoms and responsibilities and faith are by constraints on the government. As much as on anybody else.
Absolutely.
I'd like to finish off one other thought, and because you've been in policing for a long time, and even though you've been retired for a number of years, one of the things that I have found striking during this period of COVID is how much our society has changed in my lifetime. And I'll put the question to you like this, Len. You know, I see many doctors who speak to me that know things are wrong, but they don't speak out. And I've had many nurses who know things are wrong, but aren't speaking out. Listen, I know many politicians who know what we're doing is wrong, but they don't speak out. And you can go through the whole gamut, and it appears to me that you know, too many people in society are fearful, not of COVID, but the public shaming or the perceived public shaming or the perceived ostracization, you know, being marginalized and ostracized. So
I think they're also fearful of the extreme government controls.
Yeah.
That seemingly all levels of government seem to think it's perfectly okay to do.
Yeah.
We are not in a police state. We are
Yeah.
not in a communist society.
No.
We're in a free and democratic society.
Yeah.
And I think some of our politicians have completely forgotten that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, I've characterized it this. We only have what we have if we're willing to assert it.
Yes.
If I take my Dodge truck and leave it on the street with the keys in it and the windows down, well, I shouldn't be surprised that somebody's taking it from me. And
Sad, but true.
well, it's if I had a bundle of money and I put it out on the sidewalk, like ownership and freedoms and responsibilities conveys an ownership. Like you have to assert them.
Yes.
And if you're just willing that others can take them at their pleasure, then don't be surprised that they do.
No, no. Which is why, again, from a policing perspective, everything that we've done up until now is if there's a protest, we're there to protect the protesters.
Yeah.
We're there to protect the public. We're there to make sure that cars don't get driven through large crowds.
Yeah.
That if there is an opposing view,
Yeah.
that we keep them separate in order to protect both sides.
Yeah.
No matter which side says it's black or white, it doesn't matter. Or red or green or whatever. It's neither here nor there. We're there to protect everybody.
Yeah.
And make sure that they have their right to protest. And that must never, ever be taken away because we've got to hold government feet to the fire from time to time.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Len, thank you for joining me.
Thank you
for
really
everything that you and Police on Guard are doing. And I would encourage anybody watching this to go on to Police on Guard for the Facebook page and show your support for these active duty and retired police officers who are doing what we all want them to do, and that is to protect our freedoms, protect our responsibilities, and hold back this wave of that is taking away our rights and freedoms.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Len.
My pleasure. Thank you.